Welcome back, everyone. Today we are going to take another look at the Smith-Morra Gambit, and more specifically the Siberian trap variation, which starts after e4, c5, d4, c takes d4, c3, d takes c3, and knight takes c3. After this, there's a lot of things black can play, but we're going to take a deeper look today at the variation knight to c6, knight f3, e6, bishop to c4, and then queen to c7, which I've marked as a dubious move because I don't think this variation is very good for black. But there is a trap black relies on, which I will show you right now. It's after castling, black will play knight to f6. And now if you follow the normal path that you play, for example, in the Scheveningen variation or many other variations, you would play queen to e2 and then rook to d1. But this is not good in this variation, and black solely relies on this trap, because if you play queen to e2, black will try to play knight to g4, and knight to g4 is actually a pretty good move in this position, because there's a big threat that white has to take care of. And if white just plays a lazy move and tries to kick away the knight with h3, for example, he walks right into the trap, because the trap starts with knight to d4. And now white is already in a lot of trouble, because if you move the knight away, then you will be mated on h2. And if you move the queen away, then the knight can take with check. And after you take back, you will get mated on h2 once again. So if you, for example, move the queen to d1, black can just take. And after you take back, you get mated on h2. And the best variation is after knight d4, just to give up the queen by taking the knight on g4 and taking back with the bishop. But already you're way worse as white, and you never want to play these positions. Now we're going to take a first look at the theory of the Siberian trap. This theory might be a lot to digest just by watching this video. So be sure to check the description after you've stopped watching, and you can actually look at the moves by yourself in your own pace, which is really convenient if you want to study the theory by yourself. So we're going to take a look at the variation e4, c5, d4, c takes d4, c3, d takes c3, and knight takes c3. And now there's a lot of variations black can play, but we're going to take a look at knight to c6, knight f3, e6, bishop c4, and then queen c7. Now we've taken a look at the trap, and we're going to have to make sure not to fall in it once again. But we are going to castle at first. And after black plays knight to f6, we're not going to play queen e2 and run into knight g4, but attack the queen right away with knight to b5. Now, black really wants to stay on this diagonal, so it's probably going to move to b8. And that's why it's called the Siberian trap, because if white knows what it's doing and doesn't fall into the trap, black gets trapped by himself in the edge of the world, and that's why we call it the Siberian trap. Now, white is going to play the move e5, which is really important. And it's a pawn sacrifice, but if you don't make it, you might just end up in a worse position. And we've taken a look in the introductory video to knight takes e5, knight takes e5, queen takes e5. But after rook e1, queen c5, and bishop f1, this queen was going to be in a lot of trouble because it can't stay on the c-file. And white is planning to move the bishop, attack the queen, and then replace the bishop on the c1 square with a rook, and there's just too much pressure for black to hang on. So instead of taking, black's best move is actually to play knight to g4 in this position. And now white is going to play bishop f4, defending the square once again. But you might think we're once again attacking it with 3 pieces, and white is only defending it with 2. So if you take back, which is a mistake, white will take back once. And then if black takes back, there's a killer move for white, which clears the c-file and just takes a pawn with it. It's bishop takes e6, and this is actually a killer move because if black takes back, there's going to be the move rook c1, and the pressure on this c7 square is just enormous. Now black might want to play f6, and after that white can play knight to c7 check, winning the rook. But after king to f7, you're first going to take this knight, and if black takes back, queen h5 check, and then after g6, queen f3 check. After that, black has to move away, so it goes to g8, and then if you take this rook, the queen can't even take back, because then white just has the move rook to c7, and that's game over, because this king is just stuck and you have to give up many pieces just to make sure you don't get mated. So you can take back once again. So in this position, black has to play something else, and the best move, actually the only move for black, is to play a6. And now the knight has to go somewhere, and we're going to take a look at knight to d6 check. After that, bishop takes and pawn takes. You're going to see that this queen has a lot of trouble getting out of b8 and is just trapped there. And this square also takes away some black dark squares for black, so it's really a good pawn. And this is just the trade for the pawn we gave up, that we have a very dominant pawn on d6, and also that this queen is not able to go anywhere. But we're still down a pawn, so we have to prove it. And now for the first theory section, in this position we're going to take a look at the move b5, which is for some reason just bad for black. And that's only because of one move. If you don't find this move, then black is actually better. But it's the move bishop to d5. And in the Smith-Morra, it's very common to actually sacrifice a piece on d5. But this one is really counterintuitive, because you're attacked by a pawn and decide to get attacked by a different pawn. But now, if black takes back, for example, there is the move rook to e1, then king f8, knight to g5, which is really important. And there's a lot of pressure on this pawn and on the king. And right now, there's a few things black can do. For example, knight f6, but this is just a mistake, because after rook to e7, you don't want to take back. And then the pawn takes back with check, and this queen is attacked by this bishop. So it's actually a good square for the rook to go to. Now, for example, if black plays queen to b6, then there is the variation with rook takes f7, king to g8, and rook takes f6. And this is possible just because if you take back with the pawn, which is a blunder, you get mated in 3 moves with queen to d5, king to g7, queen to f7, king h6, and then beautiful knight to f3 checkmate. Now, let's say white doesn't play knight to f6, but plays the best move, which is knight to h6. We're still going to play rook to e7, and then after queen b6, queen takes d5, knight takes e7, d takes e7, king takes e7. There's a very good move that you almost have to play, because there's not many different things that you can do, because you're just down a rook right now. Is to play the move knight to e4, and let's say if black plays f6, you're going to play knight to d6. And this king is going to be in a lot of trouble. And let's say if black tries to trade the queens, there's this move rook to e1 check. And if you go to f8, you just get mated in one move. So let's say black doesn't do that and goes to d8. Then there's this killer computer move that is just very annoying for black to deal with, and he actually can't deal with, is queen to d2. And right now this is a very important move, because you're threatening checkmate in a few ways. And also, it's just lining up with this rook and actually going to the back line to actually try to mate black. So in this position, black almost has to play a5, because if he doesn't play a5 and plays, let's say, bishop to b7, there is queen to a5 check, queen c7, then knight takes b7, and after king c8, there's this move, queen takes c7 checkmate. So black has to do something about the strat of going there and defends it by playing a5. Now white has the plan to play queen to e3 and just go and checkmate this king. Now if black plays, for example, knight to b7, there's already a mate, and it's queen to e7 check, king to c7, and now just a beautiful move, knight to c8 check, and if the king takes back, which is just the best way to go because these squares are all covered and he's attacked. Now there's a beautiful mate, queen e8 check, rook takes e8, and rook takes e8 check, mate. And with these two pieces against all this material with black, you're just mating him. And this is really important theory that you should memorize if you're going to play this this variation, because only because this works, the Siberian trap variation for black is actually kind of bad. So really do try to memorize this one. Now for the second theory section, we're going to take a deeper look at a deviation on move 12. So I will just go through the moves once again. e4, c5, d4, c takes d4, c3, d takes c3, knight takes c3, knight c6, knight f3, e6, bishop to c4, queen to c7, castles, knight f6, and now instead of queen e2, we play knight to b5. Now after queen b8, there is going to be the pawn sacrifice e5, and after knight g4, bishop f4, a6, knight to d6 check, bishop takes d6, pawn takes d6, instead of b5, which was a mistake, after bishop to d5, we're going to take a look at the move castles. And after this, I'm going to recommend something that Morra Gambit also recommends in his book Mayhem in the Morra, which is a good read, so I definitely recommend that. It's going to be the move h3. And now, after knight to f6 back, we're going to play knight to e5. Now, there's a few things that black can play in this position, and to get a full detailed analysis of this position, please take a look at the lichess study in the description. But I'm going through one variation at first, which was a very weird variation, after which black is always just equal, but he has to tread very carefully and he's in a minefield. So he will definitely, I'm pretty sure of it, make a mistake at some point if he doesn't know this variation by heart, which I'm going to go through by right now. It's very long, so you can study it by yourself, but I'm just going to go through it very quickly, which is knight to b4, a very interesting move. And now there's going to be a repetition that's pretty forced, but it takes a long time to get there, so stick with me. It's going to be after bishop to b3, knight b to d5, bishop to g3, b5, rook e1, bishop to b7, bishop takes d5, bishop takes d5, bishop to h4, attacking this knight, queen to d6, it can take now. Now after bishop takes f6, g takes f6, there's queen to g4 check. And now after king h8, we're going to play queen h4. And this, you might think, well, we're giving up a piece, but after f takes e5, there's the move queen to f6 check. And after king to g8, there's this move rook to e3, and white is now better because he's able to go right through the king, and black is in big trouble. But instead, after queen h4, and black doesn't take the free knight, well, it wasn't free actually, but if he doesn't take the knight, there's a possibility to go queen to e7, defending this pawn. And now white will play rook to d1, attacking this bishop, bishop c6, knight to g4, rook to g8, now rook to e5, which we can't take because the queen is hanging. Then rook g7, knight takes f6, bishop takes g2, king h2, bishop c6, rook g1, queen to d6, and right now rook to g7. And you might think, what if we do this move in between? But now there's this move rook to g3, which is very difficult for black to defend. So instead of that, black is going to play king takes g7, queen to g5 check, now king f8, knight takes h7, king e8, knight to f6 check, and now there's going to be a repetition. So I don't think black will memorize all this theory, and if he doesn't play all these moves correctly, he will be in big trouble. So knight to b4, I don't recommend it for black, even if you know all the moves, because the best you can get out of it is just a repetition. And white will be a lot better if you don't do exactly those moves. Another possibility for black, which is played most, is to take the knight on e5, and after bishop takes e5, knight to e8. Now, this doesn't look very cool for black because all these pieces are on the back rank, so this is very difficult for black to hold on. Now, white might play a4, and after, for example, b5, which shouldn't be possible right now, and we will see it right now, because after a takes, rook takes a8, queen takes a8, this pawn is just hanging, and you can play bishop takes b5, and after, for example, bishop a6, don't take this back, because then the queen might get a free move to get into a better position. But now we can play queen to e2, and after takes, this is just a clean pawn up for white, and he's going to be able to win this pretty easily. Well, he's not a pawn up, but this passer is just really annoying for black to deal with, and it's very difficult for black to hang on. Also with this knight stuck on e8 and this rook not doing anything, white just has a lot more play and is way better right now. So this is also a variation that black can play. But if you want to get a full detailed look at this position, then you might also have to take a look at b5, which is also not good for black, but it's also just a different variation. And knight to a5 is also something you have to look at. But please be sure to take a look at the theory section, the lichess study that I've put in the description. So I'm going to stop it right here. I've given you enough theory, and you're probably going to get a headache after studying this. But it's very important to know these variations if you want to know how to really take advantage of this Siberian trap opening. I hope you found it very interesting and you're willing to learn a lot about it. And I'm going to see you in the next video on a different variation, the Scheveningen structure. So be sure to check that out, and I hope to see you soon. Bye bye.